During recent months, heavyweight government officials have been racing to various parts of Africa with promises and assurances of so-called aids and assistance to ensure economic development and prosperity of the recipient countries. This drama of Western aid to the poor countries for development and prosperity has been stage-managed repeatedly since the end of last war in 1945. Third world nations that are circling the orbit of so-called aid from the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, IMF, USAID agencies of United Nations over the last 80 years are showing no sign of inclusive growth and prosperity that is meaningful to the common people. Even after 80 years of deceptive aid, Free Press of Anglo American West has done a good job of conditioning their people of grassroots level to believe that aids to the poor countries are a sign of generosity of the donors. However, some neutral and honest intellectuals from both the West and the Third World have analyzed the real effect of these so-called aids, which are effective tools of pauperization of the recipient countries. The purpose of this narrative is not to criticize the donors of aid who donate with full knowledge that their aid will never ever lift people from poverty and underdevelopment. On the contrary, donor countries are fully conscious that recipient nations are destined to remain trapped in ancestral poverty. That is exactly the scenario the world is witnessing after 80 years of operation of aid program through various international agencies. Numerous economists, sociologists, historians, politicians have made their career under the pretext of delivering aids to sweet-sounding names like sustainable development, prosperity, inclusive growth, etc. Masses of recipient nations are pauperized and their conditions are worsening. It must be emphasized that the development of any given nation is induced not by international aid or foreign investment, or by erecting showy buildings or bridges with foreign money, or by sending citizens to study in Europe and America. The single most important criteria of national growth, prosperity and sustainable development is conditioning the indigenous population through indigenous vernacular-based schooling and prepare them to take part in inclusive growth. Citizens of a given nation through indigenous schooling must be conditioned to believe that one can't pretend to be anything else but what they actually are. Schooling of all poor countries are designed to comically imitate others, and products of such schooling are de-linked from their origin and aspire to make careers as cheap labor in the labor market of the West. It is interesting that only 2% Africans can express their thoughts in English or French. In South Asian countries, about 3 to 5% population can express thoughts in English. Yet, these languages of minority are linked to the means of dignified livelihood and public services. Question is, how is it possible to conceive of any kind of development and prosperity by excluding 90% of indigenous population? In the process of nation building, members of a given nation must be thoroughly in tuned with indigenous language, culture, and tradition to gain expertise in science and technology. It is to be noted that West Europe and the USA, with meticulous care, have done just that. Schooling of every single developed country, without any exception, is designed to tune their population with indigenous language, literature, history, tradition, and culture. The physical appearance of all developed countries, like their infrastructure, educational institutions, municipal life, administration, daily life of the general population, are in fact a reflection of their schooling. Same applies to the pauperized nations. Their shabby, deplorable, chaotic, and mismanaged conditions are also reflections of their schooling, which is pathetic and comical imitation of their colonial masters and far removed from their original culture and tradition. Adaptation of schooling, that is, replica of colonial masters, shameful imitation of things foreign, and despising everything indigenous doesn't command prestige or respect. Instead, such acts are considered appanage of the West, promoted by contemptible clowns. Examples are nations of Anglophonic South Asia and Francophonic African countries. Of course, mainstream media of US and collective West, that is developed countries, will never ever express their contempt of the schooling of poor countries in print. On the contrary, will ostensibly praise their progress and encourage continuation of such futile and pernicious system by awarding once in a blue moon a trophy like Nobel Prize to neutralize mass discontent or juggle with data to show rising rate of literacy and growth, which are basically concealment of ground reality of grassroots population. Writing intellectual narratives on underdevelopment and cursing Western imperialism have little significance in making people aware of facts. But realization of the genesis of underdevelopment and mobilizing people to work towards its solution is primarily a question of leadership and working out a strategy to counter resistance from powerful quarters from within and without. What does that mean? It simply means any effective step taken to empower people to rise above underdevelopment and pauperization will be discredited through aggressive publicity, through powerful media houses, and persuade people of grassroots level to believe and act against their own interest. Let's take an example. In China, back in the 1930s, drought and flood was a perennial occurrence resulting in crop failure followed by famine and mass migration of peasants into the cities. Then China was littered with numerous Western NGOs and church-related organizations, as the situation today in most of the poor countries. They were pretending to be helping in the development of China. Many of them were recommending China needs more aid from the Western countries. In 1949, Communist Party of China defeated their adversary Kuomintang, who fled to Taiwan. Under the leadership of Communist Party of China, government was formed. Their priority tasks were to mobilize people and let them participate in reforming education, offer universal health care, build government-owned industries, construct infrastructures, above all, create a disciplined workforce. USA and collective West, from the very first day, fiercely resisted and opposed the communist government of China. US President of that time, in 1949, Mr. Truman, is known to have reprimanded their ally Chiang Kai-shek by saying, "Because of you, we lost China." The significance of this statement is discussed and analyzed to this day. What did the president mean by "we lost China"? President realized that the leadership of China had the political will and the capability to mobilize the entire nation, condition them through right kind of schooling, make effective use of their natural and human resources that could result into immense political, economic and cultural growth of a nation of 540 million, resulting in inevitable competition with the West. That was by no means desirable for the US and collective West. They wanted China to remain poor and underdeveloped so that there would be no competition. Hostility with China and Russia is mainly because they have torn apart the Western trap to keep them poor and remain unable to condition their human resources to make use of their own natural resources for their own national use. In both cases, it is the right kind of leadership that appeared crucial. Single most important measure for all countries of Africa and South Asia is to realize that empower indigenous human resources by conditioning them through drastic reforms of schooling to gain confidence in themselves, develop respect in their own language, literature, history, tradition and culture, use it as a tool to condition their population and prepare them to participate in inclusive growth. That requires a unique kind of leadership to which the collective West will be inevitably hostile and destructive. Personalities like Patrice Lumumba of Congo. Here is a clip to show how Lumumba was treated and finally murdered, his body dismembered and dissolved in acid. His tooth was returned to his wife. Entire process was engineered and supervised by Anglo American West, while some native Congolese cheered. There were other promising leaders in Africa who tried to liberate Africa from the clutches of US and collective West, but their leadership didn't achieve very much in front of the might of imperialist power. Here are some of those personalities. This is Julius Nyerere of Tanzania with Mao Zedong of China. Here is Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. This is Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya and Samora Machel of Mozambique. These were some of the African leaders who tried to break away from their colonial past and experienced deadly resistance from their colonial masters. It must be emphasized that genuine, mass-based, all-inclusive development of any nation, large or small, can't and will never be acceptable to the so-called developed countries. Why? Because if nations of the third world countries acquire leadership that may transform existing pauperized human resources, which is the main engine of all human development and civilization, to create great educational institutions like the one operates in the developed countries, then oligarchs and ruling class of USA and the West, not the common people, will lose their grip over the world economy and consequent profiteering. In simple terms, it is the empowerment of the people at the grassroots level that is the key to liberation from the profiteering and consequent development and prosperity, leading to full expression of genuine civilization and human culture. The common phrase, freedom of press, is totally devoted to concealing this simple truth. If you like what you see and hear, please subscribe and ring the bell.